Hello everybody. I'm feeling exceptionally fancy today. Aren't you? Oh, you're not? Oh, well maybe you need a hat or a necklace or some gloves or a scarf. That would make anybody feel fancy. But even if not, even if today's not your fancy day, maybe you like to listen to some stories about somebody who is fancy? I do. All right, but first, let's go ahead and say hello. Hello, friends. Hello, friends. Hello, friends. It's time to say hello. Hello. All right, well today we're going to read two very fancy books. And you know, sometimes fancy isn't what you're wearing, but how you use your words and what words you use. So we're going to meet a little girl named Nancy who's very fancy. So we're going to be reading Fancy Nancy, which is written by Jane O'Connor, and it was published by HarperCollins. Then we're going to be reading about a princess named Rapunzel who lives in a tower and falling for Rapunzel, and how sometimes being fancy isn't necessarily, well, it doesn't work out the way you think it's going to. And this one's written by Leah Wilcox and published by PenguinRandomHouse. Let's thank PenguinRandomHouse and HarperCollins for allowing us to read our books together today. Can you give them a big round of applause? Woo! Oh, you know what? Let's do a fancy clap like you would do at the opera. Very good, very good. All right, so let's read our first book, Fancy Nancy. But you know what? Gloves may be fancy, but they certainly do make turning pages hard. So I'm going to go ahead and take off my gloves. There we go. Now I'm all ready to turn the pages with you. So Fancy Nancy by Jane O'Connor. This is my room before I made it fancy. I love being fancy. My favorite color is fuchsia. That's a fancy way of saying purple. I like to write my name with a pen that has a plume. That's a fancy way of saying feather. I can't wait to learn French because everything in French sounds fancy. Nobody in my family is fancy at all. They never even ask for sprinkles. I can't believe it. Sprinkles make everything better. There's a lot they don't understand. Lace-trimmed socks do help me play soccer better. Sandwiches definitely taste better when you stick in frilly toothpicks. A princess is supposed to keep her tiara on, Jojo. What's a fancy girl to do? I ask my doll, Maribel. Her full name is Maribel Lavinia Chandelier. Then I get an idea that is stupendous. That's a fancy word for great. Maybe I can teach my family how to be fancy. I make an ad and stick it on the fridge. Learn to be fancy with lessons from Nancy. Oh, it rhymes. Start today. Easy, fun, free. Soon there's a knock on my door. My family saw the ad. They want to get started right away. Wow, look at that. The trouble is, my family doesn't own any fancy clothes. That's okay. I go find, what is that fancy word? Oh yes, some accessories. Ooh la la, my family is posh. That's a fancy word for fancy. My mother twirls in front of the mirror. Why don't we go somewhere fancy tonight? How about dinner at the King's Crown? Dad suggests. Wow, my parents are acting fancier already. May I escort you lovely ladies outside? The limousine is waiting. My dad is our chauffeur. That's a fancy word for driver. When we arrive at the King's Crown, everyone looks up. They're probably thinking we're movie stars. I am so proud of my whole family. They eat with their pinkies up and call each other darling. For dessert, let's have parfaits, my mom said. That's French for ice cream sundaes. Amazing! My mother knows French! When our parfaits are ready, I curtsy and say, merci. I carry the tray like a fancy waiter. Oops! I trip. I slip. The tray does a double flip. Oh no. I don't feel fancy anymore. I want to go home. After I get all cleaned up, I put on my dressing gown. Those are fancy words for bathrobe. I feel much better. I'm ready for a parfait. I tell my parents, thank you for being fancy tonight. I love you, my dad says. I love you, my mom says. And all I say back is, I love you, because there isn't a fancy or better way of saying that. And that's the end of Fancy Nancy by Jane O'Connor. Now, it's almost time for our first activity. So you're going to learn how to curtsy and bow and juggle and fly and roar. Are you ready? All right, let's get to it. All right, are you ready? You're going to learn how to curtsy, which is you can hold, to curtsy, you hold out your skirt like this, and you cross your feet, and you bend your knees. All right, now, to bow, you're going to bow by placing one hand behind your back and the other hand in front of you, and bow. All right, then to juggle, you're going to just pretend like you're juggling and catching balls, like, oh, there goes one. There goes one. Okay, gotta keep the balls in the air. All right, then we're going to put the balls down. And then we're going to fly like a fairy. Can you fly like a fairy? Good job. And then we're going to roar like dragons. Can you roar like a dragon? Roar. All right. So let's go ahead and sing our song. Curtsy like a princess, just like so. Curtsy like a princess, just like so. Curtsy like a princess, just like so. Curtsy like a princess. Bow like a prince, just like so. Bow like a prince, just like so. Bow like a prince, just like so. Bow like a prince. Juggle like a jester, just like so. Juggle like a jester, just like so. Juggle like a jester, just like so. Juggle like a jester. Fly like a fairy, just like so. Fly like a fairy, just like so. Fly like a fairy, just like so. Fly like a fairy. Roar like a dragon, just like so. Roar like a dragon, just like so. Roar like a dragon, just like so. Roar like a dragon. Good job! That was some good bowing, curtsying, and roaring. All right, so now it's time to read our next book. All right, so now it's time for Falling for Rapunzel by Leah Wilcox. All right. There she is, Rapunzel. Look, there's her tower with her hair and cowls. Once upon a bad hair day, a prince rode up Rapunzel's way. There he is. From up above he heard her whine, upset her hair had lost its shine. He thought her crying was a plea and sallied forth to set her free. Alas, she was too far away to quite make out what he would say. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, throw down your hair! She thought he said, your underwear. No, Rapunzel, your curly locks! That's a funny way of saying hair. Rapunzel threw down her dirty socks. Please, love, just your silky tresses. Again, referring to her hair. She thought he asked for silky dresses. In lace and frills up to his head, The prince's cheeks were blushing red. "Rapunzel, do you have a rope?" Rapunzel dropped a cantaloupe. It burst in pieces on his head. "Oh, bad catch," Rapunzel said. "Perhaps," he sighed, "this is a test." And bound by love, he did not rest. "Okay, Rapunzel, how about twine?" Can you guess what in this picture Rapunzel's about to throw down? She heaved out her blue ribbon swine, which is a fancy way of saying pig. By now the prince was feeling hammered, not to mention less enamored. Enamored means he likes her a little bit less. He growled up, "Do you have a ladder?" Rapunzel tossed out pancake batter. It covered him from head to toe. She yelled, "It's better cooked, you know." At this the poor prince had a cry, then cupped his hands for one last try. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, throw down your braid!" What do you think she throws down? Confused, Rapunzel pushed out her maid. The maid fell squarely on the prince, quite pleased with the coincidence. She nimbly jumped off his lap and soon revived the flattened chap. Then smiling said, "For what it's worth, you'll find I'm really down to earth." His young heart thrilled. He gave a hoot. For what was more, the maid was cute. She set the prince upon his steed, then leapt behind with graceful speed. And leaning close so he could hear, she whispered something in his ear. "I fell for you when we first met." He nodded. "How could I forget?" Rapunzel watched them ride from sight. "I'm glad I finally heard him right. I hope if they come back for more, they'll think to knock on my back door." And that's the end of Falling for Rapunzel. Well, I hope you enjoyed being fancy with me today, because I enjoyed being fancy with you. Now, don't forget to share that we're doing all of these programs online with everybody you know, all right? But before we say goodbye, I have one last thing to say to you. Skinnamarink-a-dinky-dink, skinnamarink-a-doo. I love you. Skinnamarink-a-dinky-dink, skinnamarink-a-doo. I